What is up, Pitt fans? Welcome to another edition of the PG Pitt Show, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm Stephen Thompson. That's Abby Schnable. We both cover Pitt athletics for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we are talking basketball today. The Pitt Panthers, off to a 3-0 start, and for the most part, taking care of business. If you believe our friends at FanDuel, they were favored they didn't have odds for the game against Youngstown State, but Ken Pond predicted that Pitt would win by 14, and Pitt won by 15. Our friends at FanDuel had the Longwood spread at 13.5, and Pitt won by 18. Ken Pom was at 16. And then this most recent win against Eastern Michigan that Abby was in the house for, FanDuel predicts a 15.5 point win, or had the spread at 15.5 in favor of Pitt. Pitt ends up winning by 12. Ken Pom had it at 17. So, a little bit of a step back, I guess, in that sense, as you could say on Monday night. But for the most part, Abby, it seems like Pitt's kind of getting through this first stage of non-conference play before they got to go play West Virginia on Thursday.
Absolutely. I mean, they're taking care of business. It doesn't always look pretty, and they're not playing the best of teams, but I think this is kind of what you needed when you're replacing so many people and have just so many people. I mean, they're starting 2 freshmen. Like, that's inherently difficult, especially if they're not like a 5-star or even 4-star caliber at times. And so the way that they've been handling things, improving every single day, both individually and as a team, I think is really promising. They are on the shorter side, which, could potentially like shake things up for them and cause them issues down the line. But for right now, they're making up for it defensively by causing a lot of chaos. And, I think the 3-point shooting is getting a touch better, still has ways to go. But, I'm not upset that they didn't cover the spread because they were missing a key piece of their team. And you really saw guys step up.
Right. And, like I said, our friends at FanDuel had that spread at 15.5 points last night, but Pitt was up by 18 north of 14 for a decent chunk of that game, right? Like, they were clearly in control the entire time. It lapsed at certain points, but I think, it was not I think if you were watching that game, the eye test maybe told you that Pitt was, 15, 17 points better than Eastern Michigan, even if they let the score lapse a little bit. But, Abby, they did that while Brandin Cummings, I believe their leading scorer through those first 2 games, was out with a lower body injury. Doesn't sound necessarily too serious, but it seemed like Jeff Capel was worried about how this game would go with Cummings not in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, he was very open and was like, he said he was very worried, and I get it to an extent because Brandin Cummings is a huge piece not only of this team's offense but of their just the identity as a whole. And yeah, the injury doesn't seem too bad. I think it was more timing than anything that what caused him not to play. He heard it at the end of practice on Monday game. I got the vibe that they're just kind of resting him for now. But I did like how players stepped up in his absence. I mean, Noyes Indristatus got the start. He only had 9 points in the game, but I thought his defensive intensity was very present, and he was making shots when needed. But I think the guy that really, really showed out in the absence of Brandin Cummings was Omari Witherspoon. I mean, I feel like we've been getting a lot from him through the first 2 games, but his shooting hadn't totally been there. He came into the game with just 8 points over the first 2 games, and considering other players like Brandin Cummings had 37 through the first 2 games, you'd like to see a Witherspoon jump that up, and he did. I mean, he was the second leading scorer with 15 points. He was pretty efficient, going 6 for 11 from the field and then 2 for 4 from 3-point range. It didn't get the most rebounds, but that's not necessarily the role he needs, especially with how feisty Roman Sayalepa can be down low. And I was just really impressed with how he stepped up. Even Barry Dunning got some playing time and some substantial plays out of that, 7 points after he came in with just 4 on the season. And he had some good plays. I'd still like to see more from him. But with the way Omari is playing, you add Brandin Cummings back into the mix, and this is potentially a 5 double-digit scoring team at times.
Yeah, Cummings is such an important part of their offense, not just because he can handle the ball a little bit, but obviously he's, arguably their most proven shooter, or at least I'd say through this point in his career. So I think you're exactly spot on. And, even if Cummings was in the lineup, I really wanted to see Omari Witherspoon put the ball in the basket for his own confidence, but also because Pitt is going to need him to score a little bit. He's obviously got the talent too. Like he did it against Providence. He did it against UPJ. Like, I thought I think he definitely has the capability to, and it just seemed like he was a little bit rushed and maybe a little bit, kind of catching up to the speed of Division I basketball. But it seemed to come pretty naturally to him and seemed a little bit more comfortable in this game. So him being able to make some shots, Barry Dunning being able to make some shots, those were two guys who I thought really needed to get going before Pitt stepped up to, other high major play to play other high major opponents. So really good to see them getting going with Brandin Cummings out. I think the other positive thing, and we'll kind of stay in the backcourt too a little bit in a certain sense, but the turnovers, not as big an issue in this game as they have been in the past, especially early. I think a lot of Pitt's slow starts, at least from my view, have been because they, turned the ball over a bunch early.
Pitt came into the game averaging 16 turnovers a game. 32 through the first two games. That's rough. And then they came out to the game, and Omari Witherspoon had an early turnover in the first half, but they only had 2 total in the first half, which was really impressive because they got a little flustered when Eastern Michigan went on a little bit of a run. They weren't doing phenomenal with the zone defense, and I think you saw that a little bit, especially when it came to turnovers. But then they finished with 8, so they had 6 in the second half. And Jeff Capel, we asked him about the turnovers yesterday, and he said, I'm fine with 3 of them, but there were 5 that were just sloppy, careless errors that we really need to clean up, and that's part of the mental game, which I appreciated his candor in that minute, just because, he could have been like, yeah, we really improved. We halved our average in this game, because they did, and it did look better. I still like to see less turnovers from Cam Corhen. He and DeMarco Minor each had 2. The other players just had 1. DeMarco Minor makes sense, though. When you're handling the ball as much as he is, it's bound to happen, whether or not you're controlling the ball, or even just sometimes it happens. Cam Corhen needs to kick it out a little more, get rid of the ball, and stop trying to fight through 3 guys at a time. But, he's dropped down to 2, and I'm okay with that. And if they can keep this going and show that it is consistent, this is huge for that team, because I'd argue that turnover battle through the first 2 games was probably their biggest issue.
Right. And I just, anecdotally through the eye test, I feel like they get a good shot every time that they, move the ball and they don't commit a turn, every time they don't give the ball away.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this team can be, at the very worst competent offensively, as long as they aren't, racking up double-digit plus turnovers per game. If you're able to keep it at 10 or under, I actually like what this team is doing offensively. And I'm glad you brought up Cam Corhen, because interesting guy, one of those returners, and a guy that I think Jeff Capel has a lot of faith in, or, I guess you could say after Deshaun Jackson went down that he has to have a lot of faith in him. So, Cam Corhen, a lot was expected of him, or not, maybe actually, I guess that's maybe the wrong way to phrase it. I don't know if a lot was expected of him, but Pitt needed a lot out of him. And I guess, what have your impressions been of Cam so far through 3 games?
So other than the turnovers, I feel like he's been very consistent. He's the team's 3rd leading scorer behind Brandin Cummings and DeMarco Minor with 14.5. And I feel like his rebounding has gotten a lot better too, especially when Papa Conte is also on the court. I want that lineup more if possible, especially when we get into ACC play and you need the size. But I've liked his Cam Corhen's steadiness. Averaging about or scoring about the same amount of points every single game, getting rebounds when needed, both offense and defense, and he's creating plays too. He only had the 1 assist, but he had a few hockey assists yesterday too, which they don't get counted, but they are important to the grand scheme of things. He was a plus 15 on the court, had 2 blocks, I just last night, but I've been impressed with his consistency for a team that needs a person that is consistent, while freshmen like Roman Sailepa and Omari Witherspoon are still trying to figure out the game, and even Noyes and Jasadis, who's not played substantial minutes at Iowa State. And so having a guy like Cam Corhen just kind of keep it level allows for those other guys to figure stuff out. And I appreciate that out of him.
You mentioned that double big lineup with Conte and Corhen, and I believe that's, none of these combinations that Jeff Capel has played so far this season have played a ton of minutes together. I think the one they've played the most with is only 19 minutes, but, of every lineup that Pitt has played together, that's, I think, more than 5 minutes played together. having Conte and Corhen on the court together is their most efficient one by net rating. I believe they're like, I want to say plus 80, in terms of their net rating, which is pretty ridiculous. That's like 8 points per 100 possessions better than your opponent. That's really good. So, I don't expect, like I said, I don't expect that this is a team that's, maybe we told you this earlier, but I think this is a team right now that's probably shooting a little bit over their heads from 3-point range. If you're able to do that the rest of the season, then I'm fine with some small ball lineups where you put Roman, at the 4 and, he's able to rebound for you a little bit and start some breaks, and he's athletic enough and strong enough to play a little bit of defense on the interior. But if they're not going to shoot, I believe they're at 37% right now from 3. If they're not able to keep that up, then I really love this double. I think you have to go with this double big lineup just to make your rebounding and your defense as good as possible. But I'm with you on Cam. Like, the level of competition is the level of competition. And, he did face a little bit more size last night, but I think the process has been better. Jeff Capel has pointed out that he's in better shape, and so maybe not getting tired as often. And but the thing I noticed is just that, like, his hands look a little bit better, to be quite honest with you. Like, I think just, sure, defensive rebounds aren't just kind of falling through his hands anymore like they were last year. So I think that's an improvement. I think he's been better, but not, great defending on the interior. He seems to be fouling a little bit less than he was last year. I just think the process has been much better, and we'll see what happens on Thursday afternoon or Thursday night when he's got to face, another high major opponent and really step up his game. We'll see what he's able to do there. And we'll see how he goes throughout the season because, like Jeff Capel pointed out, wasn't used to the minutes load that he was playing, and so maybe wore down a little bit. But for right now, I think the early returns have been fairly positive on Corhen, and especially if he's able to play, more consistent minutes with Conte, who is a little bit more of a traditional big, maybe push Cam out to the 4 and allow him to play a little bit more, especially offensively, like closer to the perimeter, just because Cam's like a good passer, like you said, the hockey assist, like I think he does have good vision. And as long as he doesn't let the ball stick, he's not turning it over. And I think that's a really good role for him. And I have just been overall encouraged by what I've seen, not anointing him yet, not gonna call him, the best center in the ACC or anything, but I think we are in a holding position around Cam Corhen. We are monitoring the situation, and what we've seen is pretty good.
I want to go back to your small ball comment for a second because I was really impressed with the rebounding ability of some of these smaller guys. I mean, Cam Corhen's 6'10", 7 rebounds. DeMarco Minor is 6 feet tall, and he had 7 rebounds as well. And then when you look at the guy behind him, it was actually Barry Dunning with 6. And so if they can get the 3-point shooting better, I'm not worried about rebounding when it comes to playing small ball. The 3-point shooting just needs to be stronger because it's not right now. I feel like, Omari Witherspoon and Noya Sindrusaitis are settling in a little bit more there, which is good because you need that sharpshooter role. But I've been really impressed with this team's rebounding ability, and it just goes to show that Jeff Capel really took that seriously after last season when a lot of people were complaining, and he probably he definitely saw the rebounding issues. And so when you have guys, I mean, everyone had a rebound, even Makari Moore, who only had 4 minutes, and most of them had 5 or more rebounds. And so that's pretty promising with, Cam Corhen kind of leading the charge and everyone else falling around him.
Rebounding was one of the biggest things that Jeff Capel wanted to fix this year. And I think there's also been a little bit of, I don't know if you call it attitude or strategy, but I do notice that more guys are crashing the defensive glass, especially every possession. It is clearly a part of their game plan to send everyone after the boards, not just the big men. So it seems like Jeff Capel is definitely delivering on his promise to improve the rebounding. At least he's trying to. That's all we've got for this episode. Appreciate you all joining us on the PG Pitt Show. Like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything from a massive week in Pitt athletics. Not just the Backyard Brawl on Thursday, but 2 critical volleyball games, including a match against top 5 Stanford on Friday night, and then, of course, Pitt and Notre Dame on Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. College game day will be in town. We'll have plenty of coverage from there. Make sure you're also checking out post-gazette.com for all of our written work. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.